Data Center Carbon Emissions Calculator, Part 6, Calculator Storage. This calculator sheet estimates the emissions of storage services provided by leading cloud service providers, or CSPs. At the topmost part of the sheet is the reporting period and summary of emissions. The reporting period indicates the period that you would be doing the emissions reporting for, whether it be for the past year, quarter, or half year, etc. This is an identifier of your emission. At the same time, this will direct you on what value will the other inputs have to be to calculate your emissions. Towards the right of the reporting period is the summary of emissions. This gives the total emissions of all the inputs in the table below, which is for the calculation of instance-level emissions. Looking at the table below, there are several inputs required, and each requires different sources. Let's first take a look at the CSP information. Under the CSP information are the storage label, the grid emission factor GEF, the CSP column, the renewable energy used REU, and the power usage effectiveness or PUE. The database used in this tool is based on several major CSPs. The first input required is the GEF. GEF's default value comes from the latest EMA published GEF for Singapore. This is under the assumption that most of the services used will be coming from the Singapore region. However, on cases where instances are from outside Singapore, the user can input the GEF of that region under the user input value, and it will overwrite the default GEF value. To do that, first you need to identify the region where you will be creating your VM, or where your running VM is currently located. This varies from CSP to CSP. During the creation of instance for some CSP, one of the first few inputs required will be the region where you'd be getting the VM from. In some cases, there will be a generic region located in the interface, and all services obtained will be from that region. That region may be changed whenever the user deems to toggle between regions. After identifying the region, the user would have to find the EMA equivalent of that region that publishes that region's GEF. This is the process required to get the GEF for regions outside Singapore. The second input required at the CSP. This column indicates the hosting location of the virtual machine VM. The current options only include some of the top few CSP, and another option for the average of the three for CSP that is outside the list. Looking at the PUE, the default value we have is Singapore's national average PUE of 1.3, but for a more accurate calculation of your emissions, you are encouraged to use the PUE provided by your CSP for that specific region. In this case, this particular CSP publishes PUE values in a quarterly and trailing 12-month manner. Choosing which depends on the stated reporting period. In the instance where the CSP only provides PUE using the average of a certain region, we would still suggest to use Singapore average PUE for a more accurate emission calculation. The last input required for the CSP information table is the renewable energy used. In consideration of the principle of conservatism, the default value that we have placed is 0%. Not all CSP has procured REU, and we have deemed it best to put it this way. Again, for a more accurate emission calculation, it is recommended to use the REU published by your CSP. CSPs would usually publish their REU under their annual sustainability report, and it is best to make use of that. In the case of it not being publicly available, you may contact the CSP representative, and they should be able to give you the value for that. After filling in the details of the CSP information, we then proceed with the storage information. First on the input required is the storage option. Under this option, we only have hot or cold storage options. However, CSPs might provide multiple categories under these two, such as cool, cold, hot, warm, etc. The user should be able to identify which category the specific storage instance falls under, given the assumption that a hot storage is used for a frequent data access, while a cold storage is used for an infrequent data access. The storage quantity is usually presented as well in a table, chart form that should be also extractable as a value or an average over the course of the reporting period. Some CSPs actually use a pay-as-you-use scheme, and this allows for an easy identification of the user storage quantity value input and duration of storage per year in months. The number of copies is also a critical factor, since the emission of storage multiples linearly with the amount of storage copies the user have requested. This data usually falls under the redundancy data of the CSP. CSPs provide redundancy to data by having multiple copies of that data in a certain region, and sometimes having another set of multiple copies on another region. The amount of copies per redundancy option is provided and described under the user guide of the CSP for each of the redundancy options. The duration considered here is on a monthly basis, since CSP usually have a monthly bill cycle. Upon completion of all the inputs in the emission for that specific storage should be available and presented under the output table in kgCO2e per year. Moreover, the status bar should indicate complete input. Otherwise, there may have been a missed cell input from the previous column. That concludes the tutorial for calculator storage. Thank you very much for watching.